You're watching Channel 4, and now Sign On has some of the highlights from its sister program over in the USA.
What's 1% danger and 99% routine? The life of a police officer. This story and more next on Deaf Mosaic.
Hello, and welcome again to Deaf World, in which we see how deaf people in other countries live, work, play, and fight for their rights. Today, we look at the United States through the eyes of our colleagues at Deaf Mosaic, the program produced at Gallaudet, the Deaf University in Washington, D.C., and transmitted to millions of Americans by satellite on the Discovery Channel. Although not signed throughout, it is accessible through subtitles. Deaf Mosaic is a magazine program, specializing in short, punchy reports that cover the spectrum of deaf American life. What was that police item about, for example, that Mary Lou Nowitzki mentioned at the start of the program?
In the greater Houston area, there are approximately 21,000 deaf people, most of whom are law-abiding citizens. But this also means that few police officers who serve and protect this population know very much about deaf people and their culture. To change this pattern, some officers are learning sign language and pairing up with volunteer deaf rookies one day each month.
The first time I rode with him was last January 16th, but there wasn't any action. Only 2 people got speeding tickets. We went to a local station to do some of the paperwork, and we stayed there for a while. Today is a lot more exciting, and I'm learning a lot. I'm really enjoying it. We need to know what the police are doing.
I think it's important to inform deaf people and the deaf community in general about police activities because they are a substantial portion of the community as a whole. And it's been my impression that in the past there hasn't been enough interaction between the deaf community and the police department.
Another signing member of the Houston Police Department and the creator of the Ride Along program is Randy Melton, a 19-year veteran and the community liaison officer for the department.
I go out now for the last year and a half to every cadet class that we have, and I give a 2-hour presentation on what we've learned in our 5 years of working with the deaf community here in Houston and what they should know. Basic things about the deaf community. One of them is when you handcuff a deaf person, that's like bound and gagging a hearing person. And I want officers to know this, that if they go to handcuff a deaf person, why they may get a little bit excited and try to fight being handcuffed.
Officer Melton also regularly addresses the deaf community. He's the coordinator of the Deaf and Hearing Impaired Positive Interaction Program, better known as the Deaf PIP. For the past 5 years, he's been holding monthly meetings to answer questions of concern to deaf people. For example, is it illegal to have your dome light on at night when you're pulled over by an officer? No, it is not. Officer Melton often invites his colleagues to the meetings. Tonight's special guests are Officers Dudley Howden III and Charlie Berriman of the Bomb Squad.
You will notice after a while that the suit has no protection on the back side. That means we have to walk to the device or bomb and then walk backwards back from it so there's no protection. Okay.
I've worked out with our police dispatch and with our fire ambulance service here in Houston, what I call the 911 sign-up sheet. And what the deaf person does is they sign up for it, and they tell that if everyone in the house is deaf, they write that down. They give us their name, their phone number. If there's anyone in the house that is in a wheelchair or is blind or any kind of physical impairment, we want that put on there. And I take these back and I give it to our dispatch in the Houston Police Department and the fire department, and they put in their computer system.
Houston 911, do you need police, fire, ambulance, TDD transfer?
This way, the dispatcher that is telling the officer to go to that location for the emergency can tell the officer that everyone in the house is hearing impaired. So now the officer knows what to expect. We're probably by far ahead of a lot of other agencies in the state of Texas and probably in the country in dealing with problems and solving problems with the hearing impaired. We see that as our job. That's part of our job.
What an enlightened attitude. There may be some lessons there for the UK police as well. Improving attitudes is encouraged in the United States by effective legislation against discrimination. The Americans with Disabilities Act is often held up as an example of what we should aim for in this country. It's proving a great boon to many, including deaf people, although there's still a long way to go.
A year and a half ago, deaf people celebrated the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. But many people still don't understand how the law affects them personally. TDD calls are flooding a hotline with questions. How can I force my doctor to let an interpreter join us in the examination room? Do all hotels have visual fire alarms? And do they have to offer caption decoders and TDDs to their guests? We'll be answering these questions and more in our first report. Since the ADA was signed, government officials have been writing rules on how the ADA affects everyone. These rules are very complex, filling hundreds of pages of official documents.
The ADA provides for the deaf and hard-of-hearing consumer a way to combat discrimination and remove communication barriers.
The most important aspects of the ADA legislation for deaf people? I'll briefly mention 3. The first one has to do with employment opportunities once a person already has a job, including such things as job promotion, professional development, the requirement to provide interpreters, having interpreters for staff training. The second one has to do with relay services under Title IV, access to telecommunications, and the third relates to the courts and the 911 system. We now have access to these services on a state and local level.
To help deaf consumers understand their rights in the ADA era, the National Center for Law and Deafness has set up a TDD hotline.
People should call our information hotline number at 202-651-5343, which is staffed by attorneys to answer their specific questions about the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Many questions relate to medical services. It is the doctor's responsibility to be sure that you have clear communication. It's also your right to have direct TDD access to 911 emergency services. You have the right to a free TDD, caption decoder, and visual fire alarm when you stay in a hotel. When you apply for a job, you can't be asked about disabilities or required to pass a physical exam, and your employer must provide an interpreter if necessary. ADA mandates reasonable accommodations, which might include note-takers, interpreters, or any other number of services.
Just because the ADA has been passed doesn't mean that our struggle is through. We can sit back and our lives will be easy. We need to learn about the law and make use of it, because if we don't learn how to use the law for our benefit, then the law is nothing more than some black print on white paper.
But even legislation isn't enough to guarantee what most deaf Americans want for deaf children, the right to choose an appropriate school, as Deaf Mosaic's next report shows.
Many schools, both public and private, are facing financial turmoil. And in these recessionary times, states are playing educational roulette. We can only guess which school will be next to cut back on student services, or even lock its doors forever. This is exceptionally sad for deaf residential schools, the once stalwart foundation for deaf education and deaf culture in our country. The Maryland School for the Deaf, MSD, has offered free public education to deaf students for 124 years. Currently, more than 400 elementary and high school students attend. How many will attend next year? Perhaps none. Today, we live in tough times. Every state in the nation has horror stories to tell about their economy and what they've had to trim from an already too small operating budget. Maryland is no different, except one of their proposed budget cuts directly affects the lives of deaf children.
A lot of people feel they put their glasses on, they can see. So they think a child puts hearing aids on and she or he can hear. That's just not so. They hear like as if you had your radio on in a very bad storm. And for these kids to have come so far, it's only been through the help of Maryland School for the Deaf.
To help trim his state's fiscal budget, Maryland Governor William Schaefer has proposed a $12.5 billion cut, which will force the closing of the Maryland School for the Deaf. A crowd of over 1,000 MSD students, parents, and friends have gathered here today at the state capitol in Annapolis to protest the school's closing.
In 1916, my deaf mother first entered the Maryland School for the Deaf in Frederick. Then I was the second generation. My 5 deaf sons all attended the school, and that's where one of my sons met his wife. And now the 4th generation, my granddaughter attends. Do you want the School for the Deaf to close?
No, deaf education is important in Maryland.
Dr. Richard Steffen, Jr. is an administrator at the Maryland School for the Deaf.
I think we have a good relationship with the legislature, and we have friends there. The real problem is money. It's very difficult to try to help people understand that it's not really the school that is threatened so much as all Maryland agencies because of the money problem.
Michelle Ailstock has been teaching at MSD for 2 years.
I'm concerned about closing the school because I graduated from this school and became a teacher here. Now I'm worried about our next generation and what will become of them. This school is meeting their educational needs.
Dana really loves her school. Please don't take it away from her.
Deaf people finding, like many other Americans, that the dream can prove elusive. For many people, the dream is just a job they enjoy.
It's a billion-dollar-a-year business, although some would say it stinks, both for the buyer and the seller. There are tough decisions to make about style and color, but it's getting easier for some because of the talents of this man who helps lead us to take a step in the right direction. They come in all shapes and sizes. They can be conservative or outrageous, and their price may meet your budget or break your bank. But whatever your style, preference, or price range is, what you put on your feet is often a difficult decision. Helping you make the right choice is the goal of Ted Burkhart, shoe salesman for Nordstrom's department store.
I like being a salesman. It's a great challenge. Dealing with the public on a one-to-one basis. I like communicating with the people in spite of whatever barriers there may be. I enjoy the challenge, and there's always a way to get around the barriers and get to the person. You can try talking, writing, sign language, or gestures to meet the challenge of communicating.
Working his way out of the stockroom and onto the sales floor, Ted has been selling shoes for 2 years now. And while Ted admits meeting his customers is what he enjoys most, his job entails more than just pushing pumps.
The funniest kind of thing that happens with the customers is when they browse around for a pair of shoes and finally find a pair that they want. So I bring them that one, and they decide they want another, and another, and another. Sometimes they can't make up their minds. It's funny. Sometimes they are shocked by the price tag. But when they try them on, the shoes are so comfortable that they buy them anyway.
Yeah.
It's very comfortable. Do you usually wear them with socks or without? Would you wear them without socks or with socks, right?
Ted says Nordstrom's has taken every possible step to provide him, the store's first deaf employee, everything needed to do his job and advance with the company. And for now, Ted is happy doing what he does best, selling shoes, pleasing customers, and taking it all in stride.
The most interesting thing about the customers is their feet. Sometimes they have funny-looking toes, all spread out, or runs in their stockings. Some of the feet are beautiful, some are ugly, and they come in all varieties. Some smell awful, and some smell good. Some of the customers, it's funny, have sprayed their feet with perfume or put powder in their shoes before coming here. They come in all types, a wide variety. I mean, that's the human race.
From a very feet-on-the-ground kind of job to one that is pure fantasy. Mark Fisher is a film animator. Deaf Mosaic caught up with him in California, where he works.
As an animator, my job is to bring the animated characters to life. You know, the kind of characters that you might see on television or in films, but in what they call the classic style, like Disney.
Mark is one of the leading animators on Stay Tuned, a summer release from Chuck Jones Enterprises and Morgan Creek Productions. Starring John Ritter and Pam Dauber, the film includes a 7-minute sequence where the stars become animated characters.
My doctor was right. Donuts will be the death of me.
Mark worked with co-director for animation, Jeff DeGrandis.
Mark is deaf, but it didn't reflect me hiring him on as one of my lead animators because of the great talent that he has. He's able to communicate with his artwork and his drawing and his animation, and that communication made it easy for me to work with him.
What?
For a mouse, you look pretty sexy.
Too bad you didn't like the way I looked when I was human.
I always did.
News to me.
I'm sorry.
I do dialogue scenes now. That's the kind of thing that many hearing people would worry about, whether or not I could do a dialogue scene since I'm deaf. The method we used before was to have someone write in accents over the words which had more emphasis, so I would know how to draw the dialogue. But now, I use an interpreter who is able to help me hear the actual personality of the voice with the use of her acting skills.
Mark has just completed Merlin Merboy, his own short cartoon film. It's a very personal work, created to show hearing people what he's been striving for, to bring back mime animation.
What do you want? What? You want me to look at something? What is this? Are you Marcel Marceau at Harpo Marx? Pantomime kid or something? What? Oh, it's a little ducky. Ain't that cute? In the ocean, swimming around, eating its what? He sees what? Whoa! It's a big monster thing! Oh, look out for that monster! Get out of my face, will you? That even scared me. Yeah, you're scared too, and you're gonna swim out and help the poor little guy, and so you wind up and you poke the monster in the face like the Stooges or something, and then what? Oh, you pick up the little guy. He's shivering. He's scared. What a poor little ducky. Yeah, and then he likes you, and he feels good. And, wait, I did that? It's 'cause of me. What? Don't go. I gotta do something. What can I do? Eddie, please.
With Merlin Merboy, deaf audiences will notice right away some things that I did related to deaf culture. Mime is a part of my language, so it'll always come across stronger than anything done by a hearing person. Of course, that's natural. It's something I'm proud of. Well, maybe friends of mine can see my personality in the characters I animate. But it's exaggerated, more fun, more expressive, crazier.
Mark has already started work on a new film for Don Bluth Animation Studios called The Pebble and the Penguins. It's a love story, and we look forward to seeing it.
But even in the world of film, there still isn't full equality of opportunity. Earlier this year, Columbia Pictures cast a hearing actor to play a deaf man in a feature film called Calendar Girl. A group of deaf actors formed the Deaf Coalition to protest about this decision. Deaf Mosaic filmed their press conference.
After meeting unsuccessfully with the producers of Calendar Girl, the Deaf Coalition held a press conference.
We, the Deaf Coalition, wish to bring to your attention to the fact that an hearing actor has been cast to play a deaf character role, and that we feel is an insult, and it's not acceptable to us at all.
This is not about a disability. This is about an ethical relationship to a culture and a language. And that character themselves, that itself, the actor has to bring to the character to properly portray the true authenticity of the character.
In the hearing world, people discover new actors every day. They train them. So even if they couldn't find a deaf person to fit that role, they could have looked for someone who they could potentially train for the role.
Maybe they won't win every time, but one thing we certainly could learn from the Americans is how to present and publicize our case forcefully. We hope you've enjoyed those glimpses of deaf life in America through the lenses of Deaf Mosaic. Next week, Carolyn Edwards and Simeon Hart will be here to present your views. Join us for that.